So we talked a lot about storytelling when it came to Kane. You know, what it meant for a story to be told, or what it meant for someone to ask for a story, what it meant to the listener or the asker. But then our ideas of stories and storytelling changed when we read Song of Solomon, because Milkman spends so much of that book getting conflicting stories from his parents, for example, and from Pilate. And then later, when he desperately wants to know about his past, he he did ask for stories, and it was hard for him. He learned about the changeability of stories and how a memory and a story can be different every time they're told. So recently, my grandmother told me, just kind of offhandedly, that her side of the family, which is my mom's side, is Pennsylvania Dutch, which I never knew before. I mean, my dad has spent the majority of my life researching our family history, right? And I've only ever heard about our Irish ancestry. And so I decided to send an email to my mom to ask her why I hadn't heard about this before. This is the response that I received. Shannon, hi. Grandma's side is from Germany. They immigrated from Germany to Canada. Love, Dad. As you can see, I clearly addressed the email Dear Mom, and it is clearly responded to by my father. So, regardless of the fact that he didn't even answer my question, I was like, why the expletive is he even answering for my mother? And it made me think about why sometimes stories don't get told. Maybe it's because whoever should be telling the story doesn't actually have the chance. So I decided to interview my parents separately and ask them a little bit about it. How long have you been researching our family history for?
I'm not exactly sure, but it's been over 10 years. I would guess between 10 and 15 years. It's an enormous amount of time, but it's also an enormous amount of money. It's very challenging and interesting. It's like a detective story.
So, do you think the reason that Mom never really wanted to research her side of the family was because she doesn't really have time because she's working all the time?
That's in part. I think that's a big part. Also, not everybody's interested in genealogy. It's just that simple, really. And as it turns out, I've done a lot of research on Mom's side of the things as well.
Really?
And all of her ancestors come from Germany. Grandma says that they were Pennsylvania Dutch, but I've traced her family all the way back to the 1800s, and there's no indication that they were actually Pennsylvania Dutch.
Turns out my dad had done a little research on my mom's side. I was so surprised to hear him say that I actually forgot to ask him why he'd never told me about it. But what mostly caught my attention was the fact that he disagreed with my grandmother's own telling of her ancestry. So then I interviewed my mom.
Am I going to know the answers?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they're actually about you.
Okay,
They're
I'll
not,
do my best.
no, I promise they're not like...
It's not about my ancestors.
No, it's not about your ancestors, no.
No. Okay, good.
Well, first of all, I mean, that's interesting. What do you know? If you know anything.
Well, I mean, I only really know about my grandparents. Nothing beyond that.
So, you mentioned before that you forgot that you were Pennsylvania Dutch. Can you unpack that a little? Did you know that at one point and then forget it, or?
I think what I meant by that, I think Grandma had mentioned that before. There's apparently some oral tradition, so there might be somebody there that's Pennsylvania Dutch, but we haven't found that person yet, or that line.
Okay, but you remember Grandma mentioning that to you?
Yeah,
at some point.
The past.
Did you ever help Dad out with his genealogical research? About his own side of the family?
I haven't really helped a lot with Dad's genealogical research.
Is that also because you are just not that interested in genealogical research?
Yeah, that's kind of been my generally I'm not that interested. I don't know why. In terms of right at this moment, I have a harder time seeing how it's really relevant to my future and to my goals.
Another thing that I asked her about was why she didn't tell her children about her own ancestry. I mean, mostly, like, had she ever thought that we might want to know?
Yeah, I mean, I would. I'm just not sure that I'm the person that wants to spend the time doing the research. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it has occurred to me because, I mean, I certainly think.
I just stopped asking because it was obvious that I was making her feel guilty somehow about it, and that was not what I was trying to do. Somewhere between the two interviews, I just lost my indignation about the whole story, because it turned out that there really wasn't one. Instead of the storyteller not having had the chance to tell the story like I thought, it turned out that she really just didn't care. It wasn't her story. Even if it had been, I started to really understand how stories are different every time they're told because of perspective, and about how a story is never going to be the same twice from two different mouths, or, I mean, even the same mouth, and how stories are all just metonyms. They're just something smaller standing in for the whole. I mean, all stories have to be edited, even subconsciously. Like, things the teller forgets to say, or is too uncomfortable, or thinks isn't important. I mean, hell, I had to edit the crap out of this presentation just to make it fit the time limit. So, can a story ever really portray what it's meant to? One thing my parents seemed to agree on was that Grandma was wrong. So I think, yeah, I've got to go talk to Grandma. Every facet I get is a new part of the whole.